In 1930, former Assistant Secretary of the Colored Musicians Club, Local 533, Clara Clavette was stricken with illness and unable to work. Stressed, confused, and lost were only a few emotions Clavette felt during that time in her life. And with the help of Local 533, she survived those challenging years. In February of 1931, Local 533 held a dance to raise money. Not only did the dance proceeds help Clavette and her family, but the dance itself benefited the entire black community. Clavette is only one of the many people that benefited from a predominantly black organization in that area. Local 533 participated in many community service activities, such as performing locally for charitable organizations like the Young Men Christian Association, known as YMCA. Local 533 ensured that the black community was assisted economically as well as socially by providing entertainment that relieved blacks of the economic challenges of their day. Prior to the Civil Rights Act, 1965, blacks had no other alternative but to be separate. In 1935, Local 533 was birthed, a musicians' union for predominantly blacks. Local 533 made the best out of their situation and segregation by contributing to jazz and the black culture as a whole. Post 1965, the American Federation of Musicians mandated the whites only Club of Buffalo, Local 43, and 533 to merge. However, forced integration between Local 43 and 533 was not as effective as intended. Once the clubs merged, the black musicians felt they had no voice and were not able to find employment. As a result, the black musicians maintained a separate club to find gigs to play for and continued their philanthropy work in their community and are known today as the Colored Musicians Club. When the use of Local 533, that is the musicians union prior to 1969, and when it is referred to Colored Musicians Club, then it is post 1969. Black musicians decided to stay separate from the whites in evidence that forced integration does not influence people to accept each other's culture, but instead it leads to separatism among the races by choice. Three journal articles that all argue that the benefits of having segregated musicians union allowed the black musicians to preserve their culture. William F. Caton argued that even though club members from Local 43 and 533 had different viewpoints on the forced integration between the two clubs, ultimately, if it was not for Local 533's unique identity and legacy, the history of black musicians would have been lost. Richard McKay wrote a journal article on the history of the Colored Musicians Club, Local 533, in 1996 that summarizes and adds new information to the previous journal articles written in 1957. Richard McKay argued that the Colored Musicians Club, Local 533, played a substantial role in preserving the traditions of Buffalo's black culture. Lastly, Buffalo was not the only place where separate musicians occurred during the 20th century. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, musician unions Local 471, blacks only, and Local 60, whites only, remained separate until 1967. And once integrated, the black musicians' presence in the newly local disappeared. They believed the only way for black musicians to preserve their voice was to remain separate. In San Francisco, California, black musicians felt powerless and sued the predominantly white musicians, Local 6, and established their own musician unions in 1945. However, similar to Buffalo and Pittsburgh, San Francisco's locals were forced to merge, and black musicians felt like they were underrepresented. Before the merge, Local 533 was financially stable and musically/culturally different. Previous member of Local 43 White Musicians Union, Anthony Piccolo, was interviewed and he pointed out a key reason why both locals were hesitant about merging. Piccolo believed that Local 533 and 43 never merged prior to 1969 because rumors had spread that Local 533 had $50,000 in the bank. Piccolo thought that Local 533 did not want to share their wealth with Local 43, whom had less income. A hindrance to merging was Local 533's desire to preserve their hard-earned money, which also shows how financially well off they were as a separate club. Piccolo also believed another reason why there was a delay in the merges between both clubs was the different types of music each club favored. Conrad Topfer Jr. was one of the few white musicians in Local 533. He expressed his thoughts about merging with Local 43 through an interview. Topher explained multiple times that he was questioned by Local 43 members on his reasoning behind joining Local 533. He told Local 43 members that many of his friends were in Local 533, and he wanted to be with them. Topher believed many Local 43 members were jealous of Local 533 because they did not have as many good musicians as Local 533. He also expressed that many of Local 43 members were racist and did not understand jazz. He stated, "If you understand jazz, you can never be a racist." Meaning that many white musicians played and liked jazz, but rarely took the time to understand the people and struggles behind the style of the genre. Local 533 benefited as an independent club because they were allowed to monitor their spending as money as well as control the music they wanted to play.